Okay, so during the last London Film Festival, right, there was it was a late edition, but they showed the Tender Bar. Problem was, I was already locked in to check something else. So, yeah, it was one of those irritating things where, you know, conflicts, right? And you're like, oh, what am I going to watch? I don't know. I forget the film that I saw instead. But hey, it has just dropped on Prime Video. So I was able to check it out, right? So this was directed by George Clooney. It is an adaptation of a book by the same name from J.R. Moehringer. Moehringer? I think that's how you say it, but I might be wrong. The screenplay is written by William Monahan. It's produced by Clooney, Grant Heslov, and Ted Hope. Cinematography is Martin Rowe. It's edited by Tanya M. Swirling. Music is from Dara Taylor. Um, yeah. So the gist, right? It is set in 1970s Long Island, right? Um, yeah. Our 9-year-old young JR, he's seeking a replacement for his father, who disappeared shortly after his birth, and bonds with his uncle Charlie and the patrons at Dickens, a bar in Long Island. Uncle Charlie works there as a bartender and knows all the staff and regular patrons. He is charismatic, and all of his friends are eager to initiate JR into their rituals. JR listens closely to the stories of these men and relies on these stories for guidance on how to live. His mother, Dorothy, is eager for JR to, you know, become something, right? And her big wish is for him to go to Yale or Harvard and become a lawyer. While JR, you know, he's just looking to find himself and make his mum proud. All right, so yeah, that's the story. Now we start off with young JR and Dorothy's mum. Oh, yeah, cast. Cast. So well, we see three versions of JR. Our young version, who we meet first, is played by Daniel Ranieri. We then have Ty Sheridan take up the role, and there's a future JR played by Ron Livingston. His mother Dorothy is played by Lily Rabe. His uncle Charlie is played by Ben Affleck. We have their Dorothy's father, Grandpa Maguire, played by Christopher Lloyd. And I was, watching it, I'm like, is that Christopher Lloyd? And I gotta say, Christopher Lloyd, he doesn't look like he looks like Doc. I think he just seems to have looked like Doc from Back to the Future forever. It's insane. It's kind of crazy. His wife, Grandma Maguire, is played by Sondra James. Um, a few of the patrons in the bar. We've got Bobo, played by Michael Braun. Joey D, played by Matthew Delamita. Chief, played by Max Casella. And then we've got a couple of JR's friends from Yale. Wesley, played by Rezi Felix. Jimmy, played by Ivan Long. And then there's Sydney. She's played by Brianna Middleton. So, yeah, people, that's the cast. So, yes, as I was saying, we start off with them moving back home, you know, um, which is kind of establishing the situation. They've not got a lot of money. They've hit some tough times, you know. Um, so yeah, they go to stay at Dorothy's dad's house, and you get the feeling that they've done it a few times, right? That's the fallback when things go wrong. We sounds of well, yeah, when you haven't paid rent for 5 months. I was just like, shit, man. I mean, the fact you were able to slide for 5, that's pretty crazy. But yeah, we get the sense that it's something that's happened in the past, but it's not what she wants. Though JR, he's kind of happy because it's a full house, right? You've got Charlie there, you got Dorothy's sister there, there's some other kids, the grandparents. It's just busy. And he kind of misses that. He enjoys that. So we see all of this, and just his attachment to Charlie, right? Yeah, we do get the whole dad thing. So his dad's a disc jockey, right? A DJ on the radio, The Voice. And we see him listening to the radio and all of this. Right. And so that's it. It's kind of establishing this. There's a few times where he's expecting his dad and his dad doesn't show. So we see all of this. We kind of get a look at what kind of person the dad is, right? But the mum is the bedrock. I mean, she's like trying to inspire and push him to do his best. So that is essentially the film. Now, we do, for a bit, we kind of cut between him as the older him, Ty Sheridan him, on a train, right? So that's at the start. So he's on a train talking to a priest, right? A little random, but yeah, he's talking to this priest. So we go in between that a little bit, and then we get more into the future happenings, right? Now, when we do that jump to the future, it is abrupt. Like you have the kid, and then boom, years later, it does that thing, which that seemed a little abrupt, but I did enjoy, like, for me, JR as a kid, that was some of the most engaging elements of the film, to kind of see that relationship, see that, what I mean, because he's a sponge, so we see the learning, the understanding, just all of this kind of stuff, right? It's funny because we have, the narration, right? I think it's Ron Livingston, the future JR, narrating what's going on. Be like, yeah, so we moved back home, and hey, so I went to the bar and blah blah blah. So we get all of this, and it's interesting. Now, with that narration, there is a Wonder Years kind of vibe, right? No, no, that kind of jumped out. There was this kind of essence of Wonder Years in the air, right? Which isn't a bad thing. It's funny because the film kind of it goes between that and I'd say almost famous, right? They're the kind of things that really seem to come to mind. Well, ah, and also a green book, right? Now, I will get to that. So, yeah, we have all of this. We're seeing JR's life from these different perspectives, right? These different angles. And it's interesting. There's not necessarily the bite, right? And I mean with that is, okay, why do I care? Right? Give me something to really care about. Because although we're showing all of this, we didn't really get the whole why. Like, why do I give a fuck about my dad? Right? That was a big thing. And I don't really feel it was properly articulated. Right? You have occasions with him, as a little kid, you can get it a bit more, be like, oh, where's dad? Blah blah bum. But going into the adulthood, right? We hear him say, "Oh, I'm not hung up on this," and blah blah blah. But obviously, there's still something there, but we don't. It's like, why? Because I kind of think as a kid, you don't necessarily know, right? Now we see little situations at school and stuff like this, which does kind of it would make you go, oh man, like I'm the only kid without a dad, or bum bum bum. You feel me? But then as an adult, right, you kind of figure Charlie is the dad, right? Charlie and his grandpa are the people that have then helped him, looked out for him, nurtured him, from that male perspective. Obviously, his mum was, as I said, the driving force, the but bedrock. But here's the thing: what what's the thing he's missing as an adult, right? Now, for me as a kid, yeah, growing up, it was just like, oh man, you know what I mean? I wonder what the deal is with my parents and blah 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 blah. So you think that, but then as you get older, it's just like, you know what? Fuck them. You know what I'm saying? Like you either move past it, or there would be the things like spiraling around going, oh man, I wish I knew why this happened. Why don't they, you know what I mean? There would be these things, there would be that inner monologue, but we don't have that. We don't have that. The other problem, there's a few things. I say problem. I mean, it was like there was a lot of things going down in the film, right? And it's just like, oh, I want you to go to Harvard or Yale, and then we see him get in, right? And then there's a mention about a newspaper, and then we see him get it, and it's just like, where's the struggle, right? We don't really see the struggle. It's something gets said, and then it happens, right? That was a thing that was, going down all the time in the film. He'd be like, oh yeah, and I want this, and oh, I've got it. Even at the beginning, when we see him as the youngster, right? Ranieri, the whole notion of because his mum wants him to go to, these unions and become a lawyer, because that pays money, which you understand. The whole, oh, at this point, I wanted to be a writer. You're like, but why? Because all we get is Charlie go to him, hey, you can borrow any of these books, right? Because he had Dickens, because it's called Dickens, so there's a little Dickens behind the bar, and he gives him a book, and he's just like, at this point, I knew I wanted to be a writer, and it's just like, why? Right? Because Charlie just gives him a book and goes, if you read enough, if you read plenty of something like if you read plenty of books, you could become a writer, which it doesn't really go like that, but hey ho. Um, then we get at this point, that's when I really wanted to be, but it's just like, why? Because Charlie says it? And you look at, but if it was just like, oh man, I really look up to Charlie, which we know he does, right? And if Charlie feels I could do something, I feel that I can do so. Fine, that's something, but we don't get that. So it's just like, wait, what about this moment drove you to be a writer then? Like what? You know? And I think that was one of the issues for me with the film. Like some of these moments, we're not seeing the follow through, right? We're not seeing why this would influence, right? Why this would drive him to be, you know? That was the odd thing. Yeah. Now there's another thing that I have, right? So he goes to uni and his two roommates are black and Asian. And this is the 70s, right? This is the 70s. It might be the 80s now. He's like the early 80s, but even so, shit was crazy, right? Shit was crazy. Look, you think, you know what I mean? Where they're having, oh, you went to a Black Lives Matter rally. Yeah, you're changing. You're not doing shit, but understand, hey, it was like, yeah, you might have seen the footage of George Floyd, Breonna Taylor, just all of these people, which was terrible. But shit was worse, man. Like racism was overt, right? A lot of the time now, it's undercover shit. It was out and proud back then. You feel me? So a lot of these big schools, and they've been called on it, their policies, they weren't letting certain peoples in. So to then see these diverse classes and everything is a bit like, wait, what? Huh? And then Sydney, you know, Sydney is played by Brianna Middleton, a young black lady, and just all of that, it'd be like, oh, of all the girls, it's the black one that catches my eye. And I'm gonna be all odd and I don't know how to do this and I don't know how to do that. Oh, but look at me, I'm talking to a girl with ease, which was it went against what we'd seen of his character up to that point, right? But listen, I have no issues with Sydney being black or anything like that. But, but if you're showing a period of time and you're having it like you want to have a diverse cast and all of this, great, great, great. But you gotta show the ramifications of all of this, right? the racism, the stigmas, just all of, and they don't. Right, so it plays like, oh, all of this is hunky dory. Yeah, no one would have said anything. No, like, yeah, everything was great, and it's just like, yo, it wasn't, man. Like, what are we doing? And then we're showing like Sydney's parents are mixed, and it's just like, okay, right? That's what we're doing. So everything is just hunky dory in the world, you know? And that was just a bit, huh? Really? Like it's weird, the backbone moments that we see with him, because we see him kind of act funky at breakfast, right? And you could like listen, it shows the parents be a little bit dismissive, but if they don't know you and they've heard you the night before banging their daughter, you can understand the parents are going to be a little bit, you know what I'm saying? So it was these weird situations that we're seeing, but it's just like, huh, what, you know what I mean? What's happening here, right? Um, like even towards the end, there's this thing with his dad, and it's like in this like you just see him, like the way he was just like, "Where's your phone?" Right? There was no, "Hey, are you okay? Can I help you with this?" It's just, "Where's your phone?" And yeah, he did a thing, but that seems to be more for him and his past than the incident that we see. You know what I mean? Then the other thing that smacks it, he gets a lift from the police. He gets a lift from the what the fuck is that? Right? He gets a lift from the police. Gets a lift from the police. There's just these baffling moments in the film. It really is, right? There's all the talk of being a writer. Now, the later bits reminded me a little bit of Hustle and Flow, and I say that because in that film, right, you've got Terrence Howard's character wanting to be a rapper, trying to push his tape on Ludacris, but not going to open mics, not hustling, but just wanting the success. And I kind of found with this, like we have him go, "Ah, I want to be a writer," but then, you know, he only tries the New York Times after someone's like, "Why don't you try that?" And he's like, "Oh, they won't want me." And she's like, "Huh?" So we go to see him go there, and he's like, "Oh yeah, I want to do this and blah blah blah," and I get a job. Right, the fact that the way he gets the job again seemed mad easy. Now, maybe in real life it wasn't as easy, but in the film it's shown mad easy, right? But we have him talking about working there and going, "Ah, well, you know, I'm just doing this," but we don't see him writing, right? Because ain't the odd thing I find, right? And in a lot of films about writing and writers, you have someone going, "I really want to be a writer," but not writing, right? It's that funny thing of you know, sometimes you go like, "Hey, I've been to some comic book conventions, just all of this, like film conventions," and people are like, "Hey, I really want to write for you. I really want to do work on that property." And they're like, "Okay, so what are you doing?" "Oh, nothing." And it's just like, all right, well, you can self-publish. right? Especially nowadays, it's so much easier. Even back then, there was ways and means, but people just want the big break rather than the hustle. And so he's like, oh, I want to be this thing, but we don't like if we saw shots of him in the evenings, come home from work, writing, go to work, right? Because he's living and breathing, fine. But we don't get that. We just have him like, oh, I'm not getting the breaks. And he's like, but motherfucker, what are you doing? Right? What are you doing? You know? And it doesn't really show that, right? So it's this odd thing that I found with the film that I felt it wanted to be this thing, but it doesn't quite deliver for me anyway. It didn't quite deliver. We don't get the payoffs. We understand the wants, but it's just like, but why should you get that? Right? Why? What are you doing to get that? You know what I mean? That was a thing. Now, it's not to say it's a bad like it's shot very well. Like Clooney does a very nice job with the shoot. And some of the performances are like Affleck killed it. Gotta say, Affleck killed it. You know what I mean? Christopher Lloyd, Lily Bab, they were all very good. Sheridan's Sheridan, Ranieri, they gave good performances, but it's just the character wasn't very layered. So I don't know. There's not a lot of ways for them to truly shine in those roles. You know, there is that. Um, I would say as some of the people are meant to get older, they didn't really look a lot older. Like when you consider the time, some people they didn't necessarily look a lot older. And man, it's always when you watch a film set in a period of time, one of the things I always love is the music, right? Because sometimes it's stuff you haven't heard by artists, and you're like, oh shit, I don't know that one. Or other times it's just hearing some of your favorite shit again, right? Now, this one, it threw out some hits, but not always by the peoples, right? And it's cover versions, and it's just like, oh man, like I don't want to hear this song by a motherfucking cover, right? Either play the original or play something else. You know what I mean? There was that, but hey, it's out there, people. It's on, as I said, look, it's on Prime. You know what I mean? So if you read how do you say his name again? Mo fuck, how do you man Moehringer? If you read his 2005 book, The Tender Bar, you enjoyed that, then maybe you want to check this out, right? Um, yeah, it's just under 2 hours, right? 104 minutes, you know, an hour and 45, essentially. I would say if you like films like Almost Famous, right? I think this would maybe speak to you. But the thing that I think where it would speak to you more, if you enjoyed Green Book, I think if you enjoyed Green Book because for me, they have the same sort of failings. But if you loved Green Book, then I think this will resonate with you for sure. For sure, people. So yeah. And there you go. The Tender Bar. It's on Prime Video now, people. So yeah, if it sounds like it's something for you, hey, go pull up a bar stool.